setbacks. Yesterday, Carson Wentz made do with what he had and led the Eagles to a victory over the Giants, securing the NFC East division crown. Wentz finishing at 23 of 40 for 289 yards and a touchdown in the process. He becomes the first player in NFL history to throw for 4,000 yards in a season without a 500-yard wide receiver. That's according to ESPN Stats and Information Research. And now, Dan Orlovsky joining us. Max, we're going to start this conversation off with you because you are, we all know, one of Wentz's biggest critics. How impressed are you by Wentz?
Not overly recently. I mean, it's amazing to me how including like the beat writers in Philly have moved the goalposts on Carson Wentz. And I want to be very clear about where I stand on this, and have been since I was arguing he should be MVP 13 weeks into the season a couple of years ago. Carson Wentz is an MVP talent. The reason I'm hard on him is because he should be. He's paid like it, and by the talent, he should be a top 5 quarterback. But he's not. He's a top 15 quarterback. And the best proof that he's top 15 is that his biggest fan, Dan Orlovsky, says he's top 10. You know when Dan Orlovsky can only give you top 10, you're probably like top 15 if you're Carson Wentz. That's the best evidence. Look, even that stat, the 4,000 yards without a 500-yard receiver, what does that really mean? It means they're a bad first quarter team, which they are, with a pass-happy coach. So they're throwing the ball a lot. And by the way, when you look at it, they have competence all over the roster. Their starting running back goes down. They got another guy to step in who's excellent. They need a guy for the Darren Sproles role. They got a guy to do that. Their tight end goes down. Is going to make the Hall of Fame one day. Then their second tight end is excellent. They have Pro Bowlers all over the offensive line. They have none of these were excuses for Donovan McNabb. None of this stuff was an excuse. Was Carson Wentz a Pro Bowler this year? No, was he top 3 in his conference? No, he is Carson Wentz as a quarterback talent. You could argue is second only to Patrick Mahomes, but he ain't the second best quarterback in the league, and I would argue he's not one of the 10 best quarterbacks in the league. So the fact that he's now getting fat off the NFC East, where except for one defensive touchdown, it's one-score games wherever you look. By the way, he's playing for a Super Bowl winning head coach who won the Super Bowl, made the playoff run without him at quarterback in a division where he's getting all these wins that Orlovsky wants to give him credit for, in a division where every other coach literally is being fired as we speak. Like we're waiting for breaking news. All the other coaches, head coaches, are getting fired, and he's playing against them in tight games. So is it nice? Is he ticking in the right direction? I'm not at all saying he's not a good player. Carson Wentz not a bad quarterback. I'm saying his level of play is not commensurate with his pay or his talent right now.
Well, I got it, Dan, because I'll give you the last voice on this before you and Max get into it. Just let me say a couple of things. Number one, Max Kellerman, you need to pipe down on the emotion, because that's the similar kind of emotion you had when you were raving about how great Baker Mayfield was going to be this upcoming season. The emotions parallel with one another. Just be careful about that. That's number one. Number two, there's an inordinate amount of drops that Carson Wentz was suffering from, at least costing the Philadelphia Eagles 3 games, which Dan Orlovsky accurately pointed out weeks ago. Even though the Dallas Cowboys had their drops too, as you pointed out in Philadelphia, the reality is Carson Wentz had to deal with that. That's point number 2. Point number 3, when we look at Carson Wentz, durability was a question mark. Got hurt 2 years ago en route to an MVP. Ultimately, he would have captured the MVP award, but he got injured late in the season when Nick Foles ultimately took over and guided them to a Super Bowl. Last year, he got hurt again. Nick Foles comes in, gets them to the playoffs, plus a victory over Chicago. We get all of that. But this season, you have Deshaun Jackson. He's gone. Alshon Jeffrey. He's gone. Nelson Aguilar. He's gone. Ultimately against Dallas, Zach Ertz went down. So you're talking about a Carson Wentz that went in yesterday's game down 4 receivers. Okay, we don't even get started with their running game. We just found out about Miles Sanders because we didn't know too much about him prior to this season because he wasn't supposed to be their guy. Jordan Howard out of Chicago was supposed to be their guy. That didn't end up being the case. And so when you look at the bevy of weapons, when you talk about Donovan McNabb, I hear you on that because that's a point that Donovan McNabb has made in the past, publicly and privately, that the bar was moved. He was held to a more stringent critique per se. But the bottom line is those weapons, although somewhat mediocre in a lot of people's eyes, that Donovan McNabb had available to him, Let's keep in mind, he had them from start to finish. He didn't start with them and then they got injured and disappeared. And you had to fit in guys from the practice squad, for crying out loud, like a Ward or a Boston Scott or people like that. So these are all the things that Carson Wentz did. And in light of that reality, along with being 5-7, along with the eye of the storm coming in his direction, and them still closing out the season with 4 straight wins, finishing strong in the month of December, I would say he deserves far more respect than you are giving him. Go ahead, Dan.
Well said, Stephen A. All right, Max, this is my favorite thing to do week by week is come into here and talk to you about Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz's 2019, in totality, is the second most impressive quarterback performance in the whole NFL. Outside of Lamar Jackson, it's the second most impressive one. Not a single skill player, tight end, wide receiver, running back that started yesterday was in the NFL week 1. Not on the Eagles, was in the NFL. The Eagles to go on this run needed Carson Wentz to play perfect football. Not good football, not really good football, perfect football. In their wins, he's got 16 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. Max, you continue to bring up the point of all these excellent pieces around him. Who?
Competent.
No.
Competent pieces.
You said excellent.
Well, is Ertz excellent? Yes or no?
Ertz didn't play yesterday, Max.
But is he excellent?
Didn't play
Is
yesterday.
Goddard excellent?
No.
He's not excellent.
Excellent,
Yes,
Max?
he's excellent.
You can't even name these.
Is Miles Sanders excellent?
Good.
Okay.
Did he play yesterday,
Max? How was Scott yesterday? He did play. How was Scott yesterday?
Excellent?
Was he excellent yesterday?
You never even heard of these guys, Max.
Whether or not I've heard of them doesn't speak to whether they're good or not. Or did they?
They weren't in the NFL.
You just said
5 months ago,
Dan,
Max.
you just said. You keep
They
moving it.
weren't in
Are
the
they excellent?
NFL.
And then you want to focus on yesterday. Let's focus on yesterday. How did Boston Scott play yesterday?
Good.
Did Carson Wentz rush for 3 touchandowns and get the defensive turnover?
Did he get the ball
game?
down to the 1 yard line to afford those 3 touchdowns? That's such a silly comment.
He had a couple of elite throws that only he or Mahomes could make, followed up by bad throws.
Max,
what do you say?
Max, the kid,
it's not true.
the guy needed to be perfect for them to go on this run.
Obviously not.
He was perfect. Your commitment to not giving him credit is just as impressive, but also mind-numbing as Jerry Jones' commitment to Jason Garrett over 10 years.
I do give him credit.
No
Wait a minute.
sense.
I don't give him credit out of proportion to the accomplishments.
Max,
every single coach in the division is fired. Do you think that's because their teams are good?
No, they lost to the Eagles. That's why.
Oh, that's why they're getting fired? Because they all
Sure.
lost to the Eagles?
Yeah.
And most of the other teams they played.
Max,
this is the worst division maybe in the history of football.
Max, he had 23
They're
completions.
one-score games for the most
23
part.
completions yesterday, right?
Yeah.
Over half were guys that were never drafted into the NFL. He has done something with nothing. It's been the second most impressive quarterback performance.
McNabb, when he went, let's talk about Donovan McNabb. When he went 11-5, he would have killed for Ertz or Goddard.
Defense all the time, Max.
Or Miles Sanders, or yesterday Boston Scott.
He had a top 5 defense, top 6 defense.
Ward has been competent.
You want to talk about the competition? You know what I find? You know what I find is silly is that you've tried to minimize what he's accomplished over the last 6 weeks because you say it's against nobody. Top 10 defenses when Carson Wentz has played them this year. He's 3rd in QBR behind Patrick Mahomes and Drew Brees. So
that's a very good sign. But I'm not taking 3 games against arguably the worst division we've ever seen in the NFL, where literally every coach is being fired. And basically, they're 1-score games. And the running back runs in 3 scores, and the defense creates a turnover that ices the game. And then act like Carson Wentz is the second coming, especially when I see the elite throws that only he and Mahomes can make. And I know he has it in him, and he's getting paid like a top 5 guy. And he follows it up with inconsistent throws. Now, if he does it against Seattle next week, then I say, okay. Now we're like, that stuff we saw against the NFC East, that there was something there. But until he does something like that. By the way, who do you think's favored in that game?
Seattle.
Right?
By 1 point.
No, it was the Eagles were favored. The Eagles opened to be favored by
Seattle's
a point.
favored
I believe
by a point.
maybe that's already changed.
All right.
But it's considered close. Look, McNabb is a great example. When McNabb had, who was the running back on that team? Stephen A., you probably remember it. Darnell Autry Was it Autry was a starting back?
Yes, he was.
You know, he would have killed for, you say Goddard's not excellent. He would have killed for Goddard or Sanders or a guy who just played like Boston Scott did. They won 11 games. I did not hear excuses from the Philly beat writers. Maybe it's selective perception, I'm forgetting. But they did not move the goalposts on McNabb the way they have on Carson Wentz. It is not that I don't respect him or don't think highly of him. I feel that you guys are disrespecting him by setting the bar so low. Why is the bar so low for him?
No. What we're not doing is equivocating and hedging our bets, or maybe that's the wrong phrase, basically reminding everybody of what we said 2 years ago. We're talking about 2019. Everybody knows that you had Carson Wentz as an MVP candidate, as we all did. I don't know why you feel the need to consistently remind folks just because they're questioning you. So what? So what? Bottom line is Carson Wentz gave us reasons to question him earlier, but the bevy of injuries combined with the drop passes and everything else, and him finding a way to maneuver his way through it, to me, elevates his stock. Now, if you want to sit up there and say, excuse me, Stephen A., where we're making a mistake is we're giving him too much credit when we should be giving credit to Doug Peterson, a legitimate argument could be made for that because this man has coached his tail off. And it's not an accident while Pat Shermer's gone. And obviously there's a change in Washington. And now, you know, there's going to be a change in Dallas. He's the only guy in the NFC East that's keeping his job. It's not just because he won the Super Bowl 2 years ago. It's because this man can coach. And he's proven it time and time again. You also got to give credit to the Eagles' defense, particularly their front seven. Malcolm Jenkins was balling yesterday. They were pressuring Daniel Jones all night long. He forced a fumble that ultimately the Giants recovered. He was good in pass coverage. He was good in run coverage. And they were all over Daniel Jones. They had 4 sacks, but they were popping him silly all afternoon long. So I got to give the Eagles defense credit in that regard, save for that 68-yard touchdown run that they allowed to Saquon Barkley. The other 16 carries he had, he only accumulated 24 yards. And so I look at it from that perspective, and I'm saying it was a collective team effort. If you want to make that argument to dilute what Carson Wentz is bringing
also,
to you,
Stephen A.,
I get that,
Stephen
but that's about it.
The defense over the last 3 games against the sorry NFC East has the highest percentage of 3-and-outs in the NFL. Well, why do we think that is? It's not just because they're talented, just like Carson Wentz is talented. It's not just because they have a good coach, just as Carson Wentz does.
Question for you.
It's that the division is awful.
Max Kellerman, did you pick the Dallas Cowboys to beat the Eagles?
Probably.
Didn't you? Yes, you did.
Yes, I did.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did.
and a miss.
And you know why you picked them? Because they were so much
healthier.
more talented than the Eagles because of all the injuries the Eagles had.
Yes,
so why do you use the why
the
do you
Cowboys are the biggest underachievers, everyone keeps saying.
That's not what I'm saying. That's not what I asked you.
Underachieved to the extent that the Cowboys
I'm sorry. Before the game against the Cowboys, before the game against the Eagles, did you know that the Cowboys were underachievers?
Yep.
Did you pick them anyway?
I did.
So why are you using that as an excuse now? If you picked them anyway, knowing they were underachievers.
It's not an excuse.
Hate to see it.
It's not an excuse. The Dallas Cowboys were coming off their best win of the season. They've looked awful since then.
I'm simply saying. Go ahead, Dan.
Let me end this argument because this has been going on for about 6 weeks. When you pay a quarterback in the NFL a bunch of money, right? The number one narrative that gets tied to that situation is what? What do we always say? All right, now you've been paid your money. You better be able to carry the team when you need him to or when they need you to. Carson Wentz, in the last 6 weeks, has carried this football team. And again, has not played well. He has played great. And everybody always ties it to some other reason. Max, you've sat here and said, well, his offensive line. He played without the whole right side of his offensive line. Everybody has always tied this kid's. I don't care who it was against. It's an NFL football team.
Barely.
He's done it on the road against Green Bay. He's done it on the road against Buffalo. He's done it for the last 6 weeks.
So how do you
Max,
explain the Falcons, Lions, and Dolphins?
No, let me. Drops, and drops.
It's drops. And then because he gets fat against the NFC East, even though it's the defense who ices it with a turnover, therefore now he's Joe Montana. So their excuses when he loses, and when he beats bad teams, he's Joe Montana.
Your commitment to this is silly. No, because I'm about to absolutely end it.
Uh-oh, here we go.
In that case,
you said you're not going to take 3 games of work, right? Mm-hmm. How about 3 seasons? Because he's the only quarterback in the history of the NFL to have 3 straight years of 20-plus touchdowns and less than 7 picks. So don't take the 3 games, Max, for what it is, whatever. 3 seasons. He's the
20
only
touchdowns,
quarterback.
but that's a kind of an arbitrary
He's the only.
stat.
He's the only quarterback to ever throw for 4,000 yards and not have a 500-yard receiver.
I just explained
Stop
why.
running
they're
from reality.
They're an awful first quarter team, so they're playing from behind with a pass-happy play caller in Peterson.
And yet they still.
And by the way, Wentz is talented.
And yet
I'm not
they
saying he's
still
not
somehow
talented.
make the playoffs. An awful first-half team, yet still make the playoffs.
Let me tell you something.
The argument's done.
And I will.
It's
And
done.
by the way, this goes for Chris Long too, who tweeted at me, and I have profound respect for not only you. I think you break down tape better than anyone since Gruden on TV. I love watching you break down tape. And Chris Long is like the best, you know,
no doubt.
Multiple-time champion. When he left the league, by the way, he was statistically one of the best edge rushers in the NFL.
Right.
Walter Payton Award. The first white guy to put his arm around, you know, a black teammate during the anthem protest. Everything about Chris Long is awesome. But I'd have a question for him because he played on the same team as Carson Wentz and Nick Foles. Who do you have a shrine to in his locker? So
in the moment,
right.
Max.
So the point is, Carson Wentz, if you want me to give him credit for something, I will give him credit for answering what I felt was a key question about him this year. Can he galvanize a team? He has done that recently.
So what hasn't he done?
As I said, I've seen him make elite throws followed up by bad throws.
Answer my question.
And I'm telling you now,
what has he not
if
done?
he were a more consistent passer in recent games, even against the NFCs, he wouldn't be in one-score games.
He's literally completed over 70% of his passes in December.
Against the dregs of the NFL.
He's completed over 70% of his passes in the month. That is the epitome
against
of consistency.
Against the worst division maybe in the history of the NFL, every single coach is being fired.
Here's the truth.
Being fired.
Here's the truth. Every